So this is the story, guys. This is going to be a sort of reaction video to my original Diablo 3 review. And the story is that I was a video game journalist for several years. And back in 2012, when Diablo 3 released, I was working for an outlet called Gamefront. So I was all over the Diablo 3 hype, and basically, I got assigned the Diablo 3 review. My original Diablo 3 review posted May 23rd, 2012. Diablo 3 released, I believe it was actually May 15th. So I did get to put a solid week into it, I guess. So here we go. I've previously expressed my concerns about Diablo 3 being able to live up to the colossal hype that surrounded it. I don't know if you guys remember, but Diablo 3 was one of the most hyped games ever, right? We had like a decade between Diablo 2 and like the Diablo 3 announcement. Like, it was ridiculous. And it was over a decade between Diablo 2 expansion and Diablo 3. So it was one of the most hyped games ever. So going on here, evidence of 11th hour changes seem to suggest that the game was being rushed out the gate. Here's the funny thing, guys. I first wrote up an article a couple months before Diablo 3 released. I saw all the warning signs. I saw things that suggested that the game was being rushed to meet a deadline. I was seeing the developers seem to be changing the way they were talking about the game. There just seemed to be some shift towards the end. Decisions being made, and I wrote this big article, and I posted it to Reddit, and I was made a pariah. People shit on me. Like, 'cause how dare I question the almighty Blizzard? How dare I suggest that Diablo 3 would be anything other than God's gift to man? Of course, when I turned out to be correct, I was never vindicated. No one ever came back and said, hey, that guy was right. No. But it's okay. 3 years later, 5 years later, however, I'm not still butthurt. I'm totally not still butthurt over that. Reddit. No, but anyway. Going on here. In fact, the article I wrote got the attention of some of the old Diablo developers. Matt Ullman, the guy who composed the legendary Diablo 2 soundtrack, personally emailed me to clarify certain things, because I spoke about sort of what happened to the old team. Anyway, so, continuing here. With none of the original series developers working on the title, this would effectively be the first Diablo game Blizzard made. Again, most of the people involved in the major direction of Diablo 2 were no longer on the project. That was Blizzard North. You have Blizzard as a company, and Blizzard North was in a separate office, and I think in a different state. Like, they were very far removed from Blizzard. Of course, there was some communication there, but most of the people who had a major hand in sculpting Diablo 2 did not make it over to the Diablo 3 team. They were part of Blizzard North, and they were either cut or left. And they had some influence into the original shaping of Diablo 3, but the original shaping of Diablo 3 was scrapped. So, basically, Diablo 3 was Blizzard's first Diablo game. So the industry titan has proven that it makes great MMORPG and RTS titles. World of Warcraft, StarCraft, original Warcraft. But how would its first action RPG turn out without Blizzard North at the helm? Having sunk a couple dozen hours into the game, I can now revisit the issue and ask, were my concerns validated? So again, at this point, I only had put a couple dozen hours into the game. Only put a couple dozen hours into the game. Blizzard first caught my eye with Warcraft 2 in 1995, and I've been following the company ever since. Beyond the Dark Portal, Diablo, StarCraft, Brood War, Diablo 2, Lord of Destruction, Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, I've played them all. I know Blizzard games. I was a huge Blizzard fanboy, guys. I still am a fan of Blizzard, but like, I used to be like the crazy devout, like, Blizzard fanboy. Like, Blizzard could do no wrong. Blizzard is like the best video game company ever. Everything Blizzard touches is pure gold. And maybe old Blizzard was like that. Maybe it was my naivete. I don't know. But like my dream was to work for Blizzard one day. I super loved Blizzard. So, To review Diablo 3, we need to consider the game's success not just as a standalone action RPG title, but also as a sequel to a long-standing franchise. Let's dive in. Gameplay. Despite a completely revamped skill system, Diablo 3 still plays like Diablo 2. Furious clicking to get to the next loot piñata as quickly as possible. Combat is straightforward, fast-paced, and satisfyingly brutal. It's simple enough to be quick to learn, but nuanced enough to offer depth for those looking to get into the numbers. I still agree that all holds true. The new skill system is a welcome change for me. I love the flexibility it affords, no longer forcing players to commit to a decision they'll have to live with for 90 levels. A lot of people are like, oh, Diablo 2 was so much better than Diablo 3, Diablo 3 sucked, Diablo 2 was the best thing ever. I'm not going to question that Diablo 2 was amazing, guys. I love Diablo 2. Diablo 2 is what made me hype about Diablo 3. I spent years on Diablo 2. I had my level like 94 hammered in. And before that, I had my level 92 Druid. That was my first really high level character. I tried all the classes for sure. My first high level 90, I got him to level 92 character, was a Druid. He was a werewolf. And unfortunately, I didn't follow a build guide right away with him. I was only at some point later on, I think, that I started to follow a build guide. So he wasn't perfectly optimized. I tried as much to redo as much as possible, but I just realized at some point, seeing how much more powerful everyone else was, I have a shit character. I'm just weaker than everyone else. And this sucks. Like, I recognize now, okay, these are all the optimum choices, and I didn't make those choices. And because of the skill tree system, you put a point, you're locked into that forever. Eventually, Blizzard added systems that allowed rerolls or resets. Thank God, because that's not a fun system. That's not a fun system to have to make a new character because you didn't know from level 1 exactly what every single skill choice you had to make was. People actually had the gall to call that replay value. People said, oh, Diablo 3 has no replay value. Why would you make a new character? You can just change your skills. What value is there in remaking a character because you can't change your skills? Like, it's just the grind of getting the character up to that level, right? Like, the key word in replay value is value. Forcing you to replay content just to get back to where you were is an added value. It's tedium. It's wasting your time. Yeah, you can waste more time doing that, but it's not valuable time. I don't know. Anyway, so other innovations improve upon the D2 experience as well, such as totems at the end of dungeons that allow you to teleport to the entrance rather than retrace your steps. That turned out to not be a super big thing, but it's a small quality of life changes overall. The ability to drop environmental hazards on enemies. That was fun in Act 1, and then it basically goes away, and at the higher difficulties, it's completely useless, so it was a neat feature. Unfortunately, it's completely useless in the big scheme of the game. Health globes that provide healing when walked over. Yes. A shared stash between all your characters. God, yes. Muling. Who remembers muling? Ah. There were so many quality of life changes made in Diablo 3. Even vanilla Diablo 3, as flawed as it was, introduced so many quality of life changes over Diablo 2. And that doesn't mean Diablo 2 was bad, it just means 10 years later, advancements have been made in video games, in ideas for how video games should be. So of course, there's going to be quality of life changes. Like, I'm sorry, I can't say that Diablo 2 is a better game today than Diablo 3 is today. Because there's so many quality of life things that Diablo 2 doesn't have that Diablo 3 has that makes it frustrating in some ways to play Diablo 2. That's not to say it's a bad game, but in some ways it's shown its age. The ability to pick up gold by simply walking over it. That's nice. Again, quality of life. And a more easily manageable inventory system. It's not all roses, however. Some enemies are more annoying than difficult to fight, such as creatures with the nightmarish affix. When they strike you, they impose a fear effect that sets your character running in the opposite direction for a moment and making combat tedious. This is simply not a fun mechanic. No one enjoys losing control of their character, but that's just a minor nitpick. Yeah, today I feel that's basically not a thing at all anymore. I remember that being much more frustrating in the beginning, and I think it might be because in the beginning, fights lasted longer, and I think you got that nightmarish thing procced more often, I feel. Like, I just remember being something that would happen a lot, and it being really frustrating. I do agree that it is not fun game mechanics to lose control of your character. That said, at this point it happens so infrequently that I wouldn't bring this up in a review today. So, I suppose it must be that back then it was more prevalent. Due to the difficulty scaling, fights lasted longer back then. There were a lot more horrible affixes that have been removed, but there were some like really bad difficulty things, really bad affix combinations specifically, and Blizzard largely fixed everything in that regard. So moving on here, what Diablo 3's combat system does best is make you feel powerful. Still agreed. The combination of slaying demons in droves and over-the-top particle effects and animations leave you feeling like the biggest badass in the burning hells, even when you're partied up with 3 other demigods. Each of the game's 5 classes plays differently and carries a unique flavor, but they all feel powerful. The power fantasy is something that Diablo 3 captures in spades. That's never been an issue. And I also feel like, even when you're in a party with people, like, oftentimes, like, you feel like you're the one doing everything, kind of. Unless you actually see someone going off and killing monsters, like, you feel so powerful. There's, like, the game is structured in such a way. The animations, just the responsiveness of the combat all makes you feel very strong. Like, all your hits have impact. Makes you feel really powerful. That said, the particle effects can get a bit overboard, and I think we're going to get to that. D3's co-op experience is enjoyable. However, combat with a 4-player party can rapidly degenerate into a complete Charlie Foxtrot. That's the PR way of saying clusterfuck. PR, I mean PC way. Especially with more than one witch doctor in the group. Back when witch doctors were the worst offenders, oh boy. Distinguishing between the various particle effects and models is a greater challenge than some of the act bosses. That said, playing with friends is always fun, generally allows for more rapid progression through the game, and with individual loot drops, you no longer have to worry about racing to click on loot before anyone else. Ugh, alright. So, 1, the particle effect, the particle creep is real, guys. It has only gotten worse. At some point, Blizzard did fix that, because it was out of control maybe about a year ago. Then they applied a patch so that, like, your allies' pets, you know, are translucent or almost invisible to you. They reduced particle effects a lot, but, like, it's certainly still a thing that playing Diablo is like looking at a kaleidoscope right now, basically. Like, I'm surprised people don't get seizures from the amount of just shit that's going on screen. That said, I don't know that I would necessarily complain about it in a review. But that other thing, again, oh my gosh, in Diablo 2, if an item dropped, it dropped for everyone. And if you pick it up, no one else can pick it up. So it's the same item drops for everyone. Whoever picks it up first gets it. That wasn't fun. It was not... Okay, maybe there was some way to find fun in it, but it's a shitty mechanic that the way bail runs went. So the endgame of Diablo 2 was bail runs. You would kill Baal, and when he would die, there would be a lag spike generally, and you would drop loot, and it's whoever had the fastest computer and the fastest reflexes to click on the items first would get them. So you're in a party of 8 people, right? It's not even 4 people, forget about that. 8 people, and you're racing to get the loot before anyone else. That's not fun. Or maybe there was fun in kind of like competing for that, but it's not healthy. It's not a good way to promote like teamwork. It's just promoting hostility and thievery. And the Diablo 2 community was pretty shitty, guys. Like, there were people trying to scam each other, like with like, you know, alleged dupe things, and like all the you know, the PvP trolling. Like, there was a lot of trolling in that community, and it was perpetuated by game mechanics that encouraged or discouraged teamwork and encouraged this lone wolf mentality. So I'm not saying that I'm going to agree that the loot can't be shared. That's a separate issue entirely, but I think the loot being individual is one of the greatest changes that could be made in a loot-based game. Alright. Now, I wasn't a fan of player versus player combat in Diablo 2, but I nonetheless appreciated, welcome new raider, the option to duel a friend now and again just for kicks. Although PvP arenas have been promised for D3, oh, how naive we were to believe they were coming. The lack of any form of temporary PvP measure is felt. If a friend and I want to cross swords, knowing full well the game isn't balanced for PvP, why shouldn't we be able to? That was a legit criticism. So legit, in fact, that Blizzard eventually added that. We never got PvP arenas, and that's something that was sort of false advertising. Like, many people bought Diablo 3 with the understanding that PvP isn't going to be in the game at launch, but it will be introduced shortly thereafter. Soon. And soon kept getting pushed back. You know, soon started off, like, by summer. Then it was by Christmas. Then it was at some point in the future. Then it was, it's never coming. And that's fair that, like, if they couldn't find a way to make it good, then fine. But it kind of sucks that it was sort of marketed as a feature that was going to come. And they did eventually introduce brawling, which was that temporary PvP measure. But it's like, why not just have had brawling from the start? I don't know. Again, I'm not even someone who cares about PvP. I've done brawling maybe a hand, like I can count on one hand the number of times I've brawled in Diablo 3. But I remember in Diablo 2, same thing in Diablo 2, I did it a couple times. It was sort of just like, I don't know, you know, you're playing with a good friend of yours and you just want to be like, hey, let's see how our builds fare off against each other. We understand the game's not balanced for PvP, but, you know, just see what happens. And it's, you know, just for kicks, you do it a couple times and that's it. Like, it just seems not difficult to just code the option to be able to attack each other. I don't know. So, I think it was a legit criticism that there wasn't the PvP at launch. I'm not going to criticize the game for not having a robust PvP, but I do believe the criticism that it didn't launch with PvP, even brawling, I think that is valid. Also, I'm sad that the PvP arenas didn't make it in, because that sounded super fun. That seemed super cool. At BlizzCon 2010, I think was the BlizzCon I went to first. 2010 or 2011. I had the opportunity to play the PvP arena in Diablo 3, and I didn't do it, and I regret it so much, because I never got to, I could have tried it, I could have known what it was like, but I heard nothing but good things from people. They just couldn't get it into a fun state, apparently, so. Alright, D3 challenges players with 4 difficulty modes. Who remembers when we just had 4 difficulty modes? Now we have, like, over 100. We got 10 torment difficulties, plus an infinite number of rifts. But, like, Grift 100 is probably, like, the highest reasonable one, or sort of around the highest for most people. So, 4 difficulty modes, allowing them to replay the same content at higher levels. Who remembers no adventure mode, guys? This was before we even realized adventure mode could be a thing, so no one complained that there was no adventure mode, because Diablo 2 didn't have adventure mode. Diablo 2 was you play through the campaign again, or you farm certain areas. So that was what Diablo 3 was as well. You just replayed the campaign over and over and over again on different difficulties, farmed up your levels, farmed up your gear. Holy shit, adventure mode is possibly the single best thing. That's difficult. There's so many single good things. There's Loot 2.0, there's No auction house. That's the same thing as Loot 2.0, I guess. So the challenge truly begins in the second difficulty setting, Nightmare. Remember, it was normal, Nightmare, Hell, Inferno. Because Diablo 2 only had 3 difficulties, we had to ramp it up with Diablo 3 and bring in 4. So the difficulty continues to ramp up nicely from there. Those seeking a greater challenge can create a hardcore character, who only has 1 life. Death is permanent. However, given the current server issues, you're as likely to die due to lag as you are through your own fault. Today, that is still the case. I believe most people who lose hardcore characters lose them due to lag or servers going down. I don't think that's fun, but I think it's what people have come to expect. I think when you create a hardcore character, you have to accept that that might be a thing. I think it's also fair to say that the server issues are probably better today than they were at launch on Diablo 2, Diablo 3. The launch servers were just awful. I think things stabilized well from there, but it had a really, really rough launch. The servers had a really rough time on launch. Visuals and setting. Graphically, Diablo 3 is dated, with disappointingly low poly counts and muddy textures. While this is nothing new for Blizzard, given the relatively long development cycle of their games, I've never felt the gap in graphical quality between Blizzard and other AAA developers more than with D3. I understand that Blizzard likes to keep scalability in mind and create games that older computers can run, but a high-res option would have allowed the game to age better, while still accommodating a wide range of gaming rigs. I didn't realize that was such an issue for me back then, because today it's not really an issue. I certainly would appreciate better textures. I certainly would appreciate higher poly counts. I feel certain models suffer from that more than others. I can't quite understand why that might be. Maybe just some of the models are newer, so they were made higher poly and higher res textures. But that's not really a grievance of the game that I have today. I think it's aged very well. It's because they went with that painterly effect. The painterly textures and stuff. And they expressed, that was specifically why they wanted to go with that. Welcome New Raider. They specifically went with a painterly texture because it would lead to that. It would lead to the game aging better. I think it's the polys that are felt the most, maybe. But, yeah, it's not a big complaint anymore. I guess, to be fair though, when you evaluate a game, you do have to evaluate the graphics. So the graphics looked good, but they did look... Do they look dated? Yeah, that's fair to say. The silver lining is Blizzard's art direction. Diablo 3 looks dated, yes, but it doesn't look bad. Far from it, in fact. Once you accept the dated graphics, you begin appreciating the artistry of the world, which is terrifically executed. Environments have depth, personality, and dynamic elements. All true. The game does look good. Visually, Blizzard has brought the Diablo series in line with its Warcraft and StarCraft franchises, with bold colors, clean lines, and stylized proportions. While D3 is certainly darker than Blizzard's other opuses, it's a far cry from the gritty, macabre horror that defined the look of the Diablo franchise. The more cartoonish style lessens the impact of gory visuals. Yeah, that is a fair critique. I'm not going to say it's a criticism, but it is something to note. They went in a different art style than Diablo 2. This was a deliberate decision. A lot of people were criticizing Diablo 3 for this in the beginning. And I guess some people still do. Because it looks good, I can't really remove points for that. It's just something to note. Like, if you're not good with that, then you're not gonna like it. But it's a matter of taste at that point. And it also, I think, speaks to the change in the people developing the game. Diablo 1, Diablo 2 look very similar, made by the same developers. Diablo 3, different team, game's gonna look different. It's kind of expected. Advancing through D3's settings relates a visual narrative that introduces darkness into the world progressively, dialing up gloom and pace with the story, and letting players revisit familiar locales along the way. Yeah, that's true, and I'd forgotten that we revisit the old locales. That was nice, that was fun. Thankfully, Blizzard realized how much players hated the jungles of D2's Act 3, and wisely skipped that setting. Though they strangely decided to keep an incarnation of the giant mosquitoes that managed to be all the more annoying by shooting bees, yes, bees, at you. Even back then I hated the bees. Ah, the bees. No, no, the bees. Leia, fetch the ointment. Oh man, guys. Like, there are some enemies you just gotta ask, like, why you make these annoying enemies, Blizz? Why? Why? D3's world is seeped in lore that has been wisely integrated into gameplay via tomes you find lying around that activate voice-over narrations. Without having to stop to read anything, you learn a little bit more about the game world while continuing your quest. I don't remember this being such a big thing for me. In fact, now that I think about it, I think the lore tomes are probably what deliver the best story. We're gonna get to story, but I think the lore tomes are actually the best way to learn the story of sort of what's going on, the backstory. Huh. Alright. As usual, Blizzard once again delivers mind-blowing quality in its cinematics. While some cliched dialogue may give you reason to turn down the volume, the visuals are a feast for the eyes. I've always looked forward to Blizzard's cinematics, and D3 didn't let me down. Yeah, I still agree that visually the cinematics, from a cinematic perspective, not to be redundant here, but like, the cinematography is great. The special effects are great. The graphics are amazing. The action is great. The only thing that isn't great is, in some cases, the cheesiness of the story. And then it's a major problem for me, or it was. And we're gonna dive into this in a bit here. Because the next bullet point, or the next heading, is the story. Yep. Alright, here we go. Diablo 3 doesn't offer Blizzard's best storytelling. Period. While there was a major surprise for me here and there, predictable plot elements and cliches pervade the story. Some lines of dialogue had me cringing. A first for a Blizzard title. I almost refused to believe that my favorite character would speak with such a mouthful of cheese. Gosh. That ending though, Tyrael. Oh. In the light of a glorious new dawn. Ah. 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 I have like PTSD from that cinematic. While villain Belial is finally revealed in a scene so predictable that even your character lampshades the fact that she saw it coming a mile away. And he is the Lord of Lies! The one character you'd expect to catch you completely by surprise. I think I started that sentence with a while. No. Villain Belial! Yeah. So, again, Belial. Jeez. That was like the worst example of like something that just was super predictable, just way too predictable. Baal, Lord of Destruction, had a more shocking reveal back in Diablo 2. That was just genius. That was a stroke of genius. The Baal Diablo 2 reveal? Holy shit, guys. That was so good. And then, just, what do we get in Diablo 3? Just hitting you on the head with a hammer is the story of Diablo 3. Want to make sure. Did you get this? Did you get every plot point? Let's smash it into your forehead. Get it in your skull, you stupid viewers. You're too dumb to understand the story. Did you get it yet? Is it in there? Is it obvious enough for every one of you to understand it? Now, I could forgive a little triteness as long as the story's ending is satisfying, but D3 fails to deliver here. D3 has some powerful and emotional scenes in its first act, but ultimately left me hollow at curtain call. I won't say the game's story is bad, but I expected more from the conclusion to the Diablo trilogy. I don't even remember that was the conclusion, actually. I didn't realize Diablo 3 would be the end of the Diablo story. The most important plot twist was predicted by fans months to years ago. That was Leah turning into Diablo. Because stupid sexy Diablo, those hips don't lie. And is essentially glossed over by the characters and never brought up again. The ending simply doesn't provide sufficient closure on the issues that emotionally engage the audience, even factoring in the probability of a sequel. it really upset me that, like, so Tyrael ends on this, like, upbeat, like, everything is awesome, guys, note. And it's like, well, fucking Leia. Leia's dead. Like, her soul was ripped apart. Like, she died in the most horrific way possible. And no one even mentions her again. Like, we follow Leia. Leia is our Luke Skywalker of the story, right? Leia is the character that, like, is grounded in reality, and, like, crazy things start to happen in her life. In fact, the story of Star Wars, of Luke Skywalker and Leia, are almost interchangeable. Like, we might do this again in a future stream, but, like, anyway. Their paths, their narrative arcs are so similar. So, like, you know, maybe we didn't love Leia as a character, but I felt I grew to care about her. You know, she was super annoying and like, oh, uncle, you and your crazy stories. Even though I'm seeing skeletons everywhere, I'm not believing you, uncle. Evil rising, you're crazy, uncle. But like, the game is clearly focusing on her being an important character that we're following, and she's unlocking these powers. And then she becomes Diablo, and no one mentions her again. Like that's an important plot point, and it's just, meh. I don't know, I felt I didn't get closure on that. I will applaud D3 for better incorporating your character into the story than its predecessor, and providing a protagonist with voice, both literally and figuratively. D2 made you feel incidental to the story. D3 makes you feel integral. Your character has backstory, interacts with NPCs in a meaningful way, and is the driving force of the narrative. Yeah, gotta give props for that. Some may say that Diablo never had a strong story, and whether that's true or not is irrelevant. The fact that Diablo 1 or 2 did not include something doesn't make it okay for Diablo 3 to exclude it, especially given how far the gaming industry has evolved over the past 15 years. We've come to expect more from stories in games. Characters with depth, captivating plots, twists that keep us guessing, and an ending that we'll remember for years. Other titles have served as paragons of how captivating a video game story should be. Get it? Paragons? That's a Mass Effect reference. Diablo 3 should be measured against no lesser standard. This is sort of a rebuttal to, like, some people were raising as a point, like, who cares if the story in Diablo 3 is bad? Diablo was never about the story. No, I'm sorry. You're gonna include a story, you're gonna get critiqued on your story. You want to include no story at all? Fine. That's a fine choice, and I'm not gonna fault you for that. But you have a story, I'm gonna critique you on it. It should be noted as a companion point to the game's art direction that the story direction also feels more in line with Warcraft than Diablo. D2's story was dark, bleak, and unsettling. D3's story is epic, cinematic, and uplifting. Neither style is superior, they're just different. And again, so I'm not gonna fault Diablo 3 for having that change in story, but it certainly is felt. That influence is certainly felt. One thing D3's story does well is build up the anticipation for boss fights by introducing key villains early on and vilifying them through repeat exposure. Once you finally face one of these antagonists, you're chomping at the bit to tear his head off. Although the device is overused to the point that the writer's intent is completely transparent, it makes for more satisfying victories. That said, cliched dialogue cheapens the bosses themselves, transforming them from frightening demons to incompetent Bond villains. I feel like before I got to that last sentence, you guys were probably protesting and like not at all with me. I hope I brought the point home there. Because we all remember like Asmodan and Diablo, you know, you won't find the next Hell Rift. I have another one. And like Asmodan, like every time, like, oh, well, you've destroyed this. Well, I didn't need my catapults, my siege engines, I have my siege breaker assault beast. What, you killed him? I didn't need him either. I hit my mic. So, the dialogue, it was good that they introduced the villains, but the way they did it wasn't good, is basically my point. Like, part of the reason I was so happy to kill Asmodan was because he just annoyed the hell out of me. But at least that anticipation was there. Like, I've been wanting to kill him throughout all of Act 3. I keep seeing this idiot, and I'm like, I want to shut your stupid, dumb face up so much. You're not intimidating to me. You're not scary. Welcome to Raider, by the way. So, the ideal would have been... So, by contrast, people like to use the Butcher from Diablo 1. It's like the classic story of the best villain in the Diablo franchise. There was no cheesy dialogue, whatever. There's no big build-up. That's a unique scenario. And you can't have every villain just be like, oh, out of nowhere. There was that short buildup of going through the corridors, right? It's dark, you're seeing more blood, and then you just hear it. Ah, fresh meat. Right? And he comes running at you like a maniac, and it's terrifying. And that was awesome. But you can't do that with every villain, right? You can't just keep repeating the same device ad nauseum. So, if they could have retained a sense of menace while still introducing the villain early and often, I think they would have captured the best of both worlds and really nailed something. And so we would have been happy and excited and looking forward to killing the villain, but not finding them to be stupid, annoying, and incompetent. D3 pays homage to the Diablo series by either bringing back or making reference to a host of familiar faces, although it is sometimes heavy-handed in its approach, jabbing you in the ribs and saying, hey, remember this guy? Huh? Though for every indiscreet reintroduction is a subtle reference that can easily go unnoticed, serving as an Easter egg for series diehards. So the worst offender there is the Butcher. Where, like, they didn't have to mention that it was the... Like, we knew it was the Butcher. We see the Butcher, and then Magda comes up, and she's like, look, it's the Butcher! Like, it's some, like, MMA or WWE wrestling, you know, thing, and they gotta be like, his intro song plays, and it's like, The Undertaker! Like, we saw it was the Butcher. We freaked out it was the Butcher. Or like, look, Tyrael, your old lieutenant. Did I mention this is your old lieutenant, Tyrael? Ho ho! I bet you're really unhappy to be fighting your old lieutenant, Tyrael. Ho ho ho! Welcome, new raider, new subscriber. Noise, thanks for the support, man. We'll do this coin giveaway. We're gonna roll this D20. Did you win a game? Anytime someone subs, you have a chance of winning a random game. Alright, next heading. Always online, welcome new raider, and auction house. Let's address the elephant in the room. Diablo 3's always online requirement, which is as draconian a DRM measure as it gets. Alarms went up amongst concerned parties when Blizzard first announced what their PR department spun as a feature. They legit tried to spin always online as a feature, guys. And Blizzard's launch night vindicated those concerns. Who remembers it? What was it? Error 53? 52? Error 52? Something like that. When server issues left paying customers unable to play for hours. And these are people who, like, took the day off of work. Like, took the week off of work, possibly. The level of vitriol that began spewing on May 15th was unbelievable. Those first few days proved that we will forever be at Blizzard's mercy. We play when they decide we can play, or when the servers feel up to it. For days, I experienced high latency and rubber banding, despite a solid internet connection. Friends and coworkers would be frequently disconnected, and patches meant hours of downtime. We'll get back to this. Okay, a year from now, no one will remember Diablo 3's botched launch. Yes, we all remember, but what I meant from it, no one would still be upset over it, or as incensed over it. But that's not the heart of the issue. The DRM is, which will never go away. Has the DRM at least served its intended purpose, which is essentially to protect the legitimacy of the auction house? Cracked servers already exist. Countless players are having their accounts hacked, and characters stripped of their items, which, by the way, doesn't happen in a single-player game. Alright, let's stop and address some of the stuff now. So, cracked servers today are not a thing in Diablo 3. However, Early on, they were a thing. Cracked servers were in development. What ended up happening, though, is that they weren't fully functional. So there were monsters in the game, but they had no AI. They would just stay there and they wouldn't do anything. And that's because the AI code is something that the crackers couldn't find, because it wasn't a single-player game. As a single-player game, they would have had access to everything. They would have been able to basically completely redo the game. Or if it was something as big as World of Warcraft, people might have been interested in just continuing to progress the crack servers anyway and like putting more effort into that, but they realized there's just no money in it, I guess, and Diablo 3 wasn't as big as World of Warcraft, so cracked servers ended up not being a thing to be concerned about at all. Countless players having their accounts hacked and characters stripped of their items. So the first couple months of Diablo 3 were when the first few months, like the summer of 2015 was like Diablo 3's peak. So much money was made on the auction house when it eventually came out, because the game was still very popular. Despite the botched launch, it was still very popular. It lost a lot of players. Its ability to retain players was very low, unfortunately, but because it was so popular, because there was the auction house, because money could be made off Diablo, there was a lot more incentive to hack people's accounts, to steal people's accounts. And also there still were exploits that made it in. There were like dupe bugs and stuff that made it in. It wasn't rife with dupes, but it still existed. Summer of 2012. Yeah, sorry about that. Good eye, or good ear, Charlie. Summer of 2012, not 2015. Worse still is the knowledge that, in its current state, Diablo 3 cannot exist as a single-player game. The auction house has clearly played into the development of the game's itemization. A friend of mine that reached level 60, which was the max level at the time, has found only one legendary item throughout the journey. In Diablo 2, he would have found at least a couple by level 30. So this is no longer an issue. Loot 2.0 fixed that. But, man, loot itemization on launch was in such a sorry state. You needed the auction house. You needed it. And it was just not fun. What is more fun, guys? To find an item yourself or to buy it? I don't have to answer that. The increased scarcity of legendary items in D3 is not an issue, given you can simply visit the auction house and purchase one. If drop rates remain the same as in D2, the market will be flooded with legendaries, and they would become worthless. Basically, so if drop rates were what they are today, then like there would be so many like items on the auction house that there would be no value to them at all, is the thing. So it's like, because they knew there would be an auction house, they specifically toned down the drop rates. By the same token, if you ignore the auction house completely, your character will wind up relatively underpowered, and the higher difficulty settings will be all the more challenging. Like, because some argument was, well, just don't use the auction house. If the auction house is such a problem, don't use it. Well, one, again, it's miserable to play with, like, shit drops. Two, everyone else is going to be so much more powerful than you, so fuck group play, because you're going to be, like, everyone's, like, little brother, basically. And you're, like, horrible gear, because finding good gear, like, screw that. Like, it's not going to happen. I have mixed feelings about the auction house. On one hand, knowing that there are innumerable awesome items just a few clicks away cheapens the effect of finding one for yourself in-game. Worse is that even if you were to find a legendary, odds are it would roll shit. Back then, the actual design philosophy was for rares to still be really good. That, like, your end game, your best in slot gear might still be some rare items. That was a design philosophy. They didn't want legendaries to be automatically superior. So, you're going to find a legendary, and like, odds are it's going to be worse than the rares you have equipped, so you're not even going to equip it. And you can't even sell it, because it's shit. And if you do find a great legendary, odds are you'll want to sell it, so that you can then afford other legendaries to wear. On the other hand, finding an awesome item for a great deal on the auction house is a satisfying experience of its own. I learned arbitrage. Arbitrage on the auction house, buying and selling basically on the auction house became the game for me. Diablo 3 became the auction house game for me. And I grew to like that game. But that's not what Diablo 3 should be. So, yeah, shopping for a good deal, finding a good deal, buying it before anyone else could get it, buying it before any of the auction house bots could get it. That was fun, but that's not in line with what the Diablo experience should be. I don't know. I will say that the auction house has a few kinks that need to be worked on, and for all the fire and the burning hells, Blizzard needs to let us access it directly from in-game. Oh my gosh, it was so annoying to have to leave a game to access the auction house. Why do we have to do that? If the design is to integrate the auction house with our play experience, then they need to stop making us log out of our game to access it. Okay, so today the auction house is gone. Loot 2.0 is another one of the best things that happened to Diablo 3. I was actually kind of sad. A part of me was sad when the auction house left, but I knew that it would make Diablo 3 a better game. I learned to become good at the auction house game. I was making real money off the auction house game, but I knew that Diablo would be a more fun game without the auction house. So I think removing the auction house was a great decision. Okay, final verdict. To circle back to my original two concerns, Diablo 3 does not feel rushed. Huh. Really? The gameplay is smooth and refined, yes, that's true. And the absence of PvP arenas, while definitely not a point in D3's favor, does not detract from the rest of the experience. This is true. However, the absence of the original developers is palpable. As for whether or not that matters, based solely on gameplay, Diablo 3 feels like a sequel to Diablo 2. Based solely on flavor, it does not. Whether or not D3 is a successful sequel to D2 is a personal decision based on which of those two factors you find more important. For me, it lies somewhere in the middle. Its value as a sequel aside, Diablo 3 is a fun and addicting game in its own right, with a high degree of polish and a recipe for longevity. Shortcomings and design decisions prevent it from achieving true excellence. Some of the most noteworthy being a mediocre story and aggressive DRM. But there's no doubt Diablo 3 will remain a mainstay in many gaming households for years to come. Did Diablo 3 live up to its hype? No. But I don't think any game could have lived up to that level of hype. So pros, polished addicting gameplay, fast-paced brutal combat, pays homage to past Diablo games, artistically rendered world, mind-blowing cinematics. Cons, dated graphics, always online requirement, lack of a temporary PvP measure while we await arenas, which are still coming, guys. No. And mediocre story. And I gave it an 85 out of 100. If I had more time with the game, that number would have gone down. You have to put in a certain amount of time with the game in order to start seeing some weaknesses emerge. So, I'm not saying I would have given it a horrible score, but it would have been lower than an 85. I find it interesting that I concluded that Diablo 3 did not feel rushed, but I do agree, gameplay is smooth and refined. I still think that it was rushed in the sense of features. That there were features that were cut. Things that I feel like that wanted to be added that were not added. And of course, today, the game is the game it should have been at launch. Like, today, I would give Diablo 3 a higher score than an 85, for sure. At least a 90, if not a 95. As an ARPG, and like, anyone who would scoff at that, like, if you're listening to this video, odds are you have sunk a large number of hours into the game. And if you did that, then would you have done that with a game that you didn't enjoy? Like, you could argue, so the biggest argument would be like, okay, well, whatever, at some point you just get to a point where it's the same thing over and over again. Yes. But D2 wasn't any different in that regard. Like, people keep holding up D2 as this paragon, and it's just the rose-colored glasses, guys. Like, D2's endgame was no different. In fact, it was even more bland. Like, it was bail runs, and it was Ubers, and it was cow level, and maybe some dueling. Like, that was the end game, and most people didn't even do much other than the bail runs. So, a loot-based game is going to be a grind-based game, and how long the game is able to grip you until you start feeling the grind and don't want to keep playing the game is the measure of how good of a game it is. And if you've sunk hundreds of hours into a game, you've gotten your money's worth, and you can't say it's a bad game unless you're saying that you enjoy wasting your time and like shitty things. Like, you can't have 500 hours of Diablo 3 logged and say this game sucks without saying something about yourself. I don't know, like, I don't understand this logic. Like some people will legit do that. Like, I played this game for so long, it sucks, it's terrible. Well, then why did you play it for so long? Like, were you hoping it would get good eventually? Like, you must have been having fun at some point. You must have been getting some degree of entertainment. Whether it becomes boring is a different issue. You do anything long enough, it's going to become boring. No game is promising to entertain you for the rest of eternity. You're not paying a monthly subscription fee here. You paid for it once. There are games where you're going to get a lot worse value per dollar. If you've put over 100 hours into a game, like, come on, guys. You've gotten your money's worth. So, looking back now, if Diablo 3 had stayed the game it was, I don't think people would still be playing it today. I think the community would be a lot smaller. If they had not kept at it, like if it had legit stayed as it was, I think it would be dead game today. It would be dead game. Unfortunately, the negative effect of the launch really turned off a lot of people, shrunk the community, and Reaper of Souls has turned the game now into the game it should have been. I'd give Reaper of Souls, especially now with this latest patch, in the current state of Reaper of Souls, I'd say a solid 95. And like the fact that we're still playing this, despite we've been playing this game for so long, and are still playing it, like, if I get bored of this game now and then, like, I've had one of every character. I've had two of every character. I've played every class. Like, until you've gone through all the content. But the fact that I'm still finding content to play years later. Like, this season, I loved this season because of the Witch Doctor build. Because I hadn't really played Witch Doctor in a while. I hadn't played the Chicken Doc build. I didn't play a lot of the recent Witch Doc builds. And it's like it rekindled my love for the game. Now, you might be able to argue now that progression happens too fast, so burnout happens faster, but I would imagine that someone who's picking up this game for the first time today has at least 6 viable characters to make. Minimum. 6 viable, one of every class to make. One of every class's build. Second, like, every class has at least 2 builds, like a speed farming and a grifting build, so someone who buys this game even today is still going to get a good amount of value out of it, even with the accelerated progression. Welcome, new raider. Maybe it is a bit too easy to progress now. Maybe we've gone too far in the opposite direction now. I don't know, but anyone who still says Diablo 3 is a bad game, I disagree. You're entitled to your opinion, but I disagree. And if your criticism is, I've played enough Diablo, I don't feel like coming back to it because it's always the same stuff, I'm not going to argue with that. Everyone has their own limit at which point it's always the same thing. Call of Duty is always the same thing over and over again, right? How does that differ? Any competitive multiplayer game is the same thing over and over again. It differs in that no match is ever going to be exactly the same, but no rift is ever exactly the same. So, it's about finding something that you enjoy doing over and over again. Really. I guess being a loot-based game, Diablo 3's core is the loot progression. So, for most people, once the thrill of the hunt of getting your endgame gear is gone, at that point, the thrill of playing the game starts to dissipate. But yeah, so that was my original review of Diablo 3. And as you can see, things have changed a lot. And my opinion on certain things has changed. And certain things were more important back then. Certain things are more important today, but that's that. I'd like to know your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on Diablo 3 Vanilla versus now. How you felt about Diablo 3 on launch and how you feel about it today. Or, if you didn't play at launch, what you've heard from others, I suppose. Let's talk about Diablo 4, Diablo 3, possible Diablo 3 expansion, whether Diablo 4 is gonna happen, whether Diablo 3 is dying. Let's talk about all that and basically the happenings that have occurred in the past.